The colony of New Haven sat on a green moon called Ceres 9, far from Earth. It had been built 40 years ago by families who wanted a new life away from the crowded cities of Earth. The moon had clean air, wide rivers, and soil that grew crops faster than anyone expected. Over the years, New Haven grew from a small camp of tents into a real town, with schools, hospitals, and a small space station orbiting above it. About 60,000 people lived there now. They were farmers, engineers, teachers, and traders. Most of them had never seen a war. Most of them had never even seen a warship. Governor Elena Reyes ran the colony. She was 52 years old, with gray streaks in her dark hair and tired eyes that had seen many hard winters. She had come to Ceres 9 as a young engineer, helping to build the first water treatment plant. Over the years she had worked her way up, and now she led the whole colony. She loved New Haven, like it was her own child. Every road, every farm, every school had a piece of her work in it. On the morning everything changed. Elena was sitting in her office, drinking coffee, and reading reports about the wheat harvest. The reports were good. The harvest would be the best in 5 years. She smiled as she read the numbers, thinking about how she would announce it at the town meeting that evening. Then her comm device buzzed. It was Marcus Cole, the head of the colony's small defense force. Marcus was a former Earth soldier who had retired to New Haven 10 years ago. He liked the quiet life, but he still trained the local militia every week, just in case. "Elena," he said, and his voice was tight. "You need to see this." She opened the video feed. On her screen, she saw the image from the orbital station's sensors. At first she thought it was a mistake, a glitch in the system. There were shapes in the sky, big shapes, coming out of nowhere. They had not been detected before. One moment the sky was empty. The next moment, there were 7 massive ships hanging above the moon like dark clouds. "What is that?" Elena asked, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her mouth. "I don't know," Marcus said. "They are not our ships. They are not Earth fleet. They just appeared. Our scanners caught nothing until they were already here." Elena's stomach turned cold. New Haven had no real military. It had a small militia of about 200 volunteers, armed with rifles and a few old defense turrets left over from the early colonization days. Those turrets were meant to stop pirates or wild animals, not warships. "Can you tell what they want?" she asked. "No response to hails," Marcus said. "They're just sitting there, watching us." For almost an hour, the 7 ships did nothing. The whole colony held its breath. People stopped their work and stared up at the sky, where the strange shapes could be seen even without a telescope, small dark specks against the blue. Children were pulled inside by their parents. Shops closed their doors. The market square, usually full of noise and people, went silent. Elena tried to reach Earth. She sent an emergency message through the Deep Space Relay, the system that connected all human colonies to Earth's central network. The message would take almost 6 hours to arrive, even at the speed of light through the relay stations. She did not know if help could come in time, or if help could come at all. New Haven was far from Earth, almost at the edge of explored space. It would take Earth's fastest ships many days to arrive, even with their advanced engines. Then, without warning, the alien ships began to move. Marcus's voice came through the comm again, sharp and urgent. "They're breaking formation. Small craft launching from all 7 ships. Elena, this is an attack." Elena ran to the window of her office. She could see it now with her own eyes. Streaks of light were falling from the sky, dozens of them, then hundreds. They looked like shooting stars, but they were moving with purpose, aiming for specific points around the colony. "Sound the alarm," she said. "Everyone, now." The colony's warning sirens began to wail across New Haven. It was a sound the town had only used for storm drills. Now, it meant something far worse. People ran for the shelters that had been built years ago and mostly forgotten. Dusty rooms under schools and community centers, never expected to be used for anything real. The alien landing craft hit the ground outside the colony's northern and eastern edges, near the wheat fields Elena had been so proud of that morning. The impact shook the earth. Dust and smoke rose into the sky. Then the invaders came out. They were not human. They stood taller than a person, with hard gray skin like stone, and 4 arms, 2 thick ones for fighting, and 2 thinner ones, that carried strange weapons and tools. Their heads had no visible eyes, only ridges and sensors that seemed to see in ways humans could not understand. They moved fast, faster than anything that size should move, and they did not hesitate. They began marching toward the colony in tight groups, weapons raised. Marcus gathered his militia as fast as he could. 200 volunteers, farmers and shopkeepers who had trained on weekends, now stood at the edge of town, with rifles in their hands, facing an enemy from another world. Marcus knew it was not enough. He had seen real war before, on Earth, years ago in the last regional conflict. He knew what an unprepared force looked like against a real army. But he also knew that if they did not stand here, the aliens would walk straight into New Haven, into the schools and homes where children were hiding. "Hold the line as long as you can," Marcus told his people. "Then fall back to the shelters. We are not here to win. We are here to buy time." The first shots were fired as the sun rose higher over Series 9. The militia's rifles cracked against the alien advance, but the invaders' gray skin seemed to shrug off most of the bullets, like it was some kind of natural armor. Only careful shots to the joints or the head ridges seemed to do real damage. A few aliens fell, many more kept coming. The aliens fired back with weapons that shot bolts of blue-white energy. These bolts tore through the militia's makeshift barricades of overturned trucks and sandbags like they were paper. 3 volunteers went down in the first minute. Marcus felt his chest tighten, but he kept shouting orders, kept his people moving and firing, trying to slow the advance without losing everyone at once. Elena, meanwhile, was in the town's command center, trying to coordinate everything at once. She had doctors moving to the shelters to set up medical stations. She had transport trucks ferrying families from the outer farms into the town center, where the shelters were strongest. She was doing everything she could, but she knew, deep down, that this was a battle her colony could not win alone. She sent another message, shorter and more desperate than the first. "New Haven under direct attack. Unknown alien force. Heavy casualties expected. Requesting immediate military assistance. This is not a drill." She hit send, and watched the message travel out through the relay, carrying her colony's cry for help across the stars. The fighting continued through the morning. Marcus's militia fell back street by street, using the town's buildings as cover, fighting for every block. They lost more people. A young volunteer named Sarah Chen, only 20 years old, was killed defending the grain storage building, buying enough time for a group of children to reach the shelter beneath the school. Marcus would remember her name for the rest of his life. By midday, the aliens had pushed the militia back to the edge of the town square, near the old fountain that had stood there since the colony's founding. Marcus had less than 100 people left standing, most of them wounded, all of them exhausted. The aliens regrouped a short distance away, seeming almost patient, as if they knew the battle was already won, and were simply enjoying the process. That was when something strange happened. One of the alien commanders, larger than the others, and wearing markings that looked like rank symbols, stepped forward. It raised a device, and a voice came out of it, distorted and strange, but understandable in broken Earth standard. "Humans, surrender. Resistance is pointless. This world belongs to the Skarn Dominion now." Marcus did not answer with words. He answered with a shot, aimed carefully at the gap in the commander's armor near its neck. The shot hit true, and the alien commander staggered, though it did not fall. The other aliens roared in a sound like grinding metal and surged forward in anger. Marcus knew this was the end of the line. His people could not hold much longer. He ordered a full retreat to the deepest shelters, covering the withdrawal himself with a small group of volunteers. They fought a desperate rearguard action through the narrow streets near the town hall, buying precious minutes for the last civilians to reach safety underground. Elena watched the feeds from the command center, her hands shaking as she saw the militia's numbers drop on the tactical display. She thought about evacuating the command center too, but she refused to leave her post. If this was truly the end of New Haven, she would not run and hide while her people fought and died above ground. Hours passed. The aliens took control of the outer farms and the northern half of the town. They did not seem to be in a hurry to finish the job, instead setting up strange devices around the captured territory, devices that hummed with energy and cast a faint purple glow over the ground. Marcus, watching from a rooftop with a pair of binoculars, guessed they were some kind of shield generators or resource extractors. He did not know, And right now it did not matter. What mattered was that his people were dying, and there was nothing more he could do but hold the line at the shelters and pray that help was coming. Deep in the underground command center, Elena kept sending updates to Earth, even though she had no idea if anyone would receive them in time. Even though the delay meant her messages were like letters thrown into an ocean, with no way to know if they would ever reach shore. She talked to her people, tried to keep spirits up in the crowded shelters, tried to make sure the children were not too scared, tried to be strong, even as fear gripped her heart. Night fell on Ceres 9. The alien ships still hung in orbit, dark shapes against the stars, patient and unmoving, like predators that knew their prey could not escape. Below them, New Haven burned in places, fought in places, and held on in places, waiting for a dawn that might never bring good news. Far away, at the Deep Space Relay Station on the edge of the solar system nearest to Earth, a small automated probe received Elena's first message. It processed the data, confirmed the emergency classification, and immediately forwarded it through the fastest available channel toward Earth Fleet Command. The message would take a little more time to arrive, but it was moving now, carrying with it images of the attack, casualty reports, and one simple, desperate request: send help. On New Haven, Marcus Cole sat against a cold metal wall in the command shelter, his rifle across his knees, blood on his sleeve from a wound he had not had time to treat. Around him, tired volunteers rested where they could, some sleeping, some staring blankly at nothing, all of them waiting for the fight to begin again. He looked at Elena, who sat nearby, still working, still trying to save her people through sheer will alone. "Do you think they got the message?" he asked quietly. "Do you think anyone is coming?" Elena did not answer right away. She looked at the ceiling of the shelter, imagining the vast distance between New Haven and Earth, imagining the message traveling through the dark, carrying their hope with it. "I don't know," she finally said, "but we have to believe they will. We have to hold on until they do." Above them, unseen, unheard, the message continued its journey through the void, racing toward a distant blue planet where humanity's greatest ships waited, ready for the call that was about to come. New Haven had survived its first day under attack. But everyone knew, deep in their hearts, that the colony could not survive many more days like this one. The aliens were patient, powerful, and clearly planning something larger than a simple raid. Whatever the Skarn Dominion wanted with Series 9, they were not going to stop until they had it. The only question now was whether Earth would answer the call in time, and what kind of force they would send when they did. Far across the stars, in a command building overlooking Earth Fleet's largest shipyard, an alert light began to blink on a console that had been silent for years. A duty officer glanced at the screen, read the emergency classification, and felt his blood run cold. He picked up the phone and called for the Admiral. The Dreadnoughts of Earth Fleet, sleeping giants that had not seen real combat in over a decade, were about to wake up. Admiral James Hollis was asleep when the call came. He had commanded Earth Fleet's 3rd Battle Group for 9 years, and in that time he had grown used to quiet nights. There had been no major wars since the Mars Rebellion was settled almost 15 years ago. Earth Fleet spent most of its time on patrol duty, training exercises, and helping with disaster relief on colony worlds. Hollis had almost forgotten what it felt like to prepare for real combat. That changed the moment his aide burst into his quarters without knocking. "Sir, you need to come to the command center right now. Ceres 9 colony is under attack. Unknown hostile force. Civilian casualties reported." Hollis was out of bed and dressed within 2 minutes. He had spent 30 years in the fleet, and old habits die hard. As he walked briskly through the halls of Fleet Command Station, orbiting high above Earth, he felt the same cold focus that had carried him through every crisis of his career. Officers and crew moved out of his way, sensing that something serious was happening. In the command center, the giant display screen showed the message that had arrived from New Haven, along with a star map showing the colony's location. Ceres 9 was far out, near the edge of human-explored space, a full 11 days away, even for Earth's fastest dreadnoughts using their jump engines. "Play the message," Hollis ordered. The recording began. It was grainy and cut in places, damaged by the distance it had traveled, but the words were clear enough. Governor Elena Reyes's voice, tired and afraid but steady, described an alien attack, ships appearing without warning, ground forces overwhelming the colony's small militia. The message ended with a simple, desperate line. "We need help, please. If anyone receives this, we need help." The command center fell silent. Nobody had expected this. There had been rumors for years about alien contact somewhere out in deep space, reports from long-range probes of strange signals, unexplained energy readings near the edges of explored territory, but nothing had ever been confirmed. Most people believed humanity was still alone among the stars, or at least alone among anyone who mattered. Now it seemed humanity was not alone after all, and the neighbors were not friendly. "Get me Fleet Command Council," Hollis said. "I want a full briefing in 30 minutes. And get me everything we have on unidentified contacts near the Ceres sector." Within the hour, Earth's highest military leaders had gathered, some in person, some through secure video link from other stations around the solar system. Admiral Hollis stood at the head of the table and laid out what little they knew. An unknown force, calling themselves the Skarn Dominion, according to the message, had attacked a human colony with no warning and no declaration. The colony's militia was fighting, but could not hold out much longer. 11 days was the fastest any fleet response could arrive, even pushing the Dreadnoughts' jump engines to their limits. 11 days, said Fleet Marshal Diane Okafor, the highest-ranking officer in the room. Will the colony even survive that long? Hollis did not have a good answer. "I don't know, Marshal, but we have to try. We cannot leave 60,000 of our people to die without sending everything we have." There was a debate, as there always is before a war begins. Some officers worried about stretching Earth's defenses too thin, about sending dreadnoughts so far from home, when the true size and strength of this new enemy was unknown. Others argued that hesitation would only cost more lives, and that humanity's response now would set the tone for every future encounter with the Skarn Dominion. In the end, Fleet Marshal Okafor made the decision. Assemble the 4th and 7th battle groups. Full war footing. Admiral Hollis, you will command the relief force personally. I want every available dreadnought, cruiser, and support ship ready to depart within 12 hours. Hollis nodded, feeling the weight of the mission settle onto his shoulders. Understood, Marshal. We will not let New Haven fall. Word spread quickly through Earthfleet's shipyards. Within hours, the massive dreadnoughts that had sat mostly idle for years, used mainly for training and shows of strength during diplomatic visits to other colonies, were being prepared for real war. These were not small ships. Each dreadnought stretched nearly 2 kilometers long, bristling with heavy plasma cannons, missile batteries, and point defense systems designed to shoot down incoming fire before it could hit the hull. They carried thousands of crew members each, along with squadrons of fighters and marine assault teams trained for boarding actions and planetary invasions. The flagship of the relief force was the dreadnought Valkyrie, Hollis's own command ship. It had been built 15 years ago, during a period when Earth worried about possible conflict with rebellious outer colonies, a conflict that never came. Since then, Valkyrie had mostly served as a symbol of Earth's power rather than a weapon of war. Now, for the first time in its long service, it would fly into real combat. As the crews worked through the night loading munitions, checking systems, and preparing the ship for the long jump, Hollis walked through the corridors of Valkyrie, talking to his people. He saw fear in some faces, excitement in others, and grim determination in most. Many of the younger crew members had never seen combat before. They had trained for years for a moment like this, never truly believing it would come. "We are not going out there for glory," Hollis told a group of young officers gathered near the main hangar. "We are going out there because 60,000 people are counting on us. Every one of them has a name, a family, a life they built out on that colony. We are going to bring them home safe, or we are going to die trying. Those are the only 2 outcomes I will accept." Meanwhile, back on Ceres 9, the second day of the invasion had begun, and things had grown worse. The Skarn forces had expanded their control over the northern half of New Haven during the night, setting up more of their strange purple-glowing devices around the captured territory. Marcus Cole, still leading what remained of the militia, had managed to gather about 70 fighters, most of them wounded, all of them exhausted. They held a defensive perimeter around the town's central shelters, where thousands of civilians now sheltered underground. The Skarn did not seem eager to finish the fight quickly. Instead, they probed the human defenses with small groups, testing weak points, learning how humans fought. Marcus began to suspect the aliens were studying them, gathering information for a larger campaign to come. This was not just an attack on New Haven. This felt like the opening move of something much bigger. Elena spent the second day organizing what resources remained. Food and water were rationed carefully. Doctors worked around the clock treating the wounded with limited medical supplies. She spoke to as many people as she could, moving through the crowded shelters, offering comfort where she could, trying to project calm, even as fear gnawed at her own heart. A young engineer named David Park approached her that afternoon with an idea. David had worked on the colony's power grid for years, and knew every wire and system in New Haven better than almost anyone. "Governor, I think I can rig some of the old mining equipment into makeshift weapons," he said. "We have plasma cutters in the northern mine that could be modified to fire short bursts, enough to punch through that gray armor the aliens wear. It's not much, but it might help." Elena looked at the young man, his face streaked with dirt and exhaustion, and felt a flicker of hope. "Do it," she said. "Whatever you need, Marcus will get it for you." Over the next day, David and a team of volunteer engineers worked to convert mining tools into crude weapons. It was dangerous, difficult work, but it gave the militia something new to fight with, and more importantly, it gave the colonists something to do besides wait and worry. The improvised weapons were tested in a skirmish on the third day, when a group of Skarn soldiers pushed toward the eastern shelter complex. The modified plasma cutters, though clumsy and slow to recharge, proved capable of punching through the aliens' armor at close range. 3 Skarn soldiers fell in the skirmish, and the militia managed to hold their position, driving the rest back with heavy losses on both sides. It was a small victory, but it mattered. It showed the colonists that the Skarn were not invincible, that with the right tools and enough determination, humans could hurt them. Word spread quickly through the shelters, and for the first time since the attack began, a little hope returned to New Haven. But the cost was high. Marcus lost 12 more people in that skirmish, including a father and son who had fought side by side, refusing to be separated, even as Marcus ordered them to different positions. Marcus carried their names with him, along with all the others he had already lost, a growing list of people who had trusted him to lead them, and who had paid the ultimate price. That night, as Marcus checked on the wounded in the medical shelter, he found himself standing next to Elena, both of them staring at nothing in particular, too tired to speak for a long moment. "How many more days can we hold?" Elena finally asked. Marcus thought carefully before answering, because he owed her honesty even when the truth was hard. "If they keep attacking like today, maybe 5 more days, maybe less if they decide to stop being careful and just throw everything at us at once." Elena closed her eyes. The message said help was 11 days away. If it even reaches Earth in time, if Earth even responds. "They will respond," Marcus said, with more confidence than he actually felt. "Earth fleet does not abandon its people. I served with men and women who would fly through hell itself for a rescue mission. If that message got through, help is already on the way." Elena wanted desperately to believe him. She looked up at the ceiling of the shelter, imagining the vast, dark distance between Ceres 9 and Earth, wondering if somewhere out there, ships were already turning toward them, engines burning bright, racing against time to save what was left of New Haven. Far above the atmosphere of Ceres 9, in the command ship of the Skarn invasion fleet, a very different conversation was taking place. The commander who had spoken to the humans, whose name in the Skarn language translated roughly to war leader Krath, stood before his own superiors on a secure communication channel, delivering a report on the invasion's progress. "The humans resist more than expected," Krath said. "Their weapons are primitive, but their determination is high. Casualties on both sides continue to mount." The voice that answered was cold and impatient. "You were sent to secure this world quickly and quietly, war leader. Instead, you have allowed the conflict to drag on for days. Do you understand what this delay risks?" Krath understood perfectly well. The Skarn Dominion's plan depended on speed and surprise, conquering vulnerable colonies before their home defenses could respond. A drawn-out battle risked exactly the kind of attention they wanted to avoid. "I will end this quickly," Krath promised. "I am preparing a final assault to crush their remaining resistance within the next 2 days." "See that you do," the voice replied. "We cannot afford for word of this attack to reach the human homeworld before the colony falls. If their military arrives to find this world already secured, there is little they can do." If they arrive to find us still fighting, it becomes a very different situation. Krath ended the call and turned to look at the tactical display showing New Haven's defenses. The humans had proven more resilient than the Dominion scouts had predicted. Their small population and lack of advanced weaponry had suggested an easy conquest, but something in their spirit, their refusal to simply surrender, had turned this into a real fight. Krath did not know it yet, but the message the humans had sent, the one his superiors feared so much, had already traveled far across the stars. It had already been received, and even now, Earth's dreadnoughts were beginning their long, hard journey toward Ceres 9, engines burning, weapons ready, carrying with them humanity's answer to the invasion. The Skarn wanted a quick, quiet conquest. What they were about to get was a war. Back on Ceres 9, as the fourth day of the siege began, Marcus Cole stood at the edge of the defensive perimeter, looking out at the alien positions in the distance, the purple glow of their strange devices casting long shadows across the ruined northern farms. He thought about Sarah Chen, about the father and son who died together, about all the others whose names he now carried. He thought about the message Elena had sent, somewhere out there crossing the void, and about whether help would truly come in time. He did not know the answer. All he could do was hold the line, fight for every hour, and trust that somewhere out among the stars, Earth had heard their call. He was right to trust it. 11 days away and closing fast, the Dreadnought Valkyrie led a fleet of 40 ships through the black void of space, jump engines glowing with barely contained power, racing toward a small green moon, and the people who desperately needed them to arrive in time. The war for New Haven was only just beginning. The Dreadnought Valkyrie cut through the darkness of deep space at a speed that would have seemed impossible to the colonists of Ceres 9, huddled in their shelters and praying for rescue. Behind Valkyrie came 39 other ships, dreadnoughts, cruisers, and support vessels, all pushing their engines to the limit, all racing toward the same distant moon. Admiral James Hollis stood on the bridge of Valkyrie, watching the star map update every hour as the fleet closed the distance. 11 days, the original estimate had said. His engineers had found ways to shave time off that number, running the jump engines hotter than regulations normally allowed, accepting the risk of engine strain for the sake of speed. Now the estimate stood at 9 days, and every hour that passed felt like an hour too long. Hollis had fought in smaller conflicts before, border skirmishes and pirate hunts, but nothing on this scale. He had never led a fleet against an enemy of unknown strength, unknown numbers, and unknown intentions. The uncertainty gnawed at him more than any known danger could have. He spent hours in the ship's tactical room, reviewing every scrap of data his intelligence officers could gather about the attackers. The name Skarn Dominion appeared nowhere in Earth's historical records. No previous contact, no trade agreements, no diplomatic incidents. Whoever these aliens were, they had stayed hidden from humanity until the moment they decided to attack. That fact alone worried Hollis deeply. An enemy capable of staying hidden for so long was an enemy with resources and patience, not some wandering band of raiders. "Sir," said Commander Aisha Bello, Valkyrie's tactical officer, approaching Hollis in the tactical room. Long-range sensors picked up something interesting 3 hours ago, a faint energy signature, similar to what the colony reported before the attack began. It appeared and disappeared near the outer edge of the Ceres system, then vanished completely. Hollis frowned. "Some kind of stealth technology? That's my guess, sir. If the Skarn ships can mask their presence until they're ready to strike, that explains how they caught the colony completely by surprise. No warning at all." This was troubling news. If the Skarn fleet in orbit around Ceres 9 could hide from sensors, then Hollis's own approaching fleet might sail straight into an ambush, without any warning of their own. He ordered increased sensor sweeps and had his engineers begin working on countermeasures, adjusting Valkyrie's own detection systems to hunt for the faint traces such stealth technology might leave behind. Days passed aboard the fleet in a blur of preparation. Marines drilled boarding actions in the cargo bays. Fighter pilots ran simulation after simulation, practicing tactics against an enemy whose capabilities they could only guess at. Weapons crews checked and rechecked every plasma cannon and missile tube, making sure everything would function perfectly when the moment came. Hollis made a point of visiting every section of the ship during the journey, talking with crew members, answering questions as honestly as he could, trying to keep morale strong even as the uncertainty of what lay ahead weighed on everyone. He knew that a fleet with low morale, no matter how powerful its weapons, could crumble in the face of the unknown. He needed his people steady, focused, and ready. On the 6th day of the journey, Hollis received an update that hit him harder than any tactical report could. A short message had arrived from New Haven, relayed through the Deep Space Network, sent by Governor Reyes 3 days earlier. It described continued fighting, mounting casualties, and a colony stretched to its breaking point. The message ended with a line that stayed with Hollis for the rest of the journey. "We are still here. We are still fighting. Please hurry." Hollis read the message twice, then called his senior officers together. "We push harder," he told them. "I want every possible hour shaved off our arrival time, even if it means running these engines past their rated limits. 60,000 people are counting on us, and every hour we save might be the difference between finding a colony still standing or finding nothing at all." His engineers worked miracles in the days that followed, coaxing more speed from the jump engines than anyone thought possible, monitoring stress levels constantly to avoid catastrophic failure. The fleet's arrival estimate dropped to 7 days, then 6. Back on Series 9, the situation had grown desperate. The Skarn had launched their promised final assault on the 5th day of the siege, throwing far more soldiers and firepower at New Haven's defenses than they had used before. Marcus Cole's militia, already worn thin from days of fighting, faced the hardest battle yet. The assault began before dawn, with Skarn artillery, strange devices that fired glowing projectiles, pounding the outer defensive line. Buildings that had stood for decades crumbled under the bombardment. Marcus ordered a fighting retreat, pulling his remaining forces back toward the central shelters, trying to preserve what little strength they had left, while still slowing the enemy's advance. David Park's improvised plasma weapons, modified from mining equipment, proved crucial in the fighting that followed. Small teams armed with these weapons ambushed Skarn advance units from the ruins of collapsed buildings, striking hard and fast before retreating to new positions. It was guerrilla warfare, desperate and improvised, but it worked well enough to slow the Skarn advance and inflict real casualties. Still, the numbers told a grim story. By the end of the 5th day, Marcus had fewer than 50 fighters left standing, most of them wounded. The Skarn had pushed the defensive perimeter back to within a few hundred meters of the main shelter complex, where over 50,000 civilians now huddled together in cramped, fearful silence. Elena spent that night doing something she had avoided since the attack began. She recorded a message, not for Earth this time, but for her own people, to be played over the shelter's speakers if the worst happened and the shelters were finally breached. In the message, she thanked every single person by name for their courage, for their sacrifice, for building a community worth fighting for. She hoped desperately that the message would never need to be played. On the 6th day, war leader Krath grew impatient with the slow progress of his forces. The humans' improvised weapons and stubborn resistance had cost him more soldiers than he cared to report to his superiors. He decided to change tactics, ordering his forces to bring forward a heavier weapon, one of the Dominion's mobile siege cannons, capable of leveling entire city blocks with a single shot. When the siege cannon opened fire on the human positions that afternoon, the destruction was immediate and terrible. An entire section of New Haven's remaining defensive line was wiped out in one blast. Marcus lost 15 fighters in an instant, including David Park, who had been working to repair one of his modified weapons near the front line when the cannon fired. Marcus felt something break inside him when he heard the news of David's death. The young engineer had given the colony a fighting chance, had turned scrap mining equipment into weapons capable of hurting an alien invasion force, and now he was gone, along with so many others. Marcus pushed the grief down, buried it deep, where it would not interfere with what needed to be done, and continued organizing the defense of the shelters, with whatever strength remained. That evening, Elena called an emergency meeting with Marcus and the remaining colony leadership in the deepest part of the shelter complex. The mood was grim. Everyone in the room understood that New Haven could not survive another attack like the one they had just endured. "We need to consider our options," said Councilman Robert Hale, an older man who had served on the colony council for over a decade. "If we cannot hold, we need a plan for what comes next. Surrender terms, evacuation routes, anything." "There is no surrender," Marcus said sharply. "You heard what that Skarn commander offered. Surrender means slavery, or worse. I have seen what they do to prisoners in the skirmishes. We do not surrender. Then what do you suggest? Hale snapped back. We are out of weapons, out of fighters, out of options. 50,000 civilians are trapped in these shelters with nowhere to go. Elena raised her hand for silence, and the room quieted. We hold, she said firmly. We hold because Earthfleet is coming. We hold because giving up now means every single person who has already died did so for nothing. We fight for one more day, and then another, and we trust that help will arrive before we run out of days to give. The room fell silent again, the weight of her words settling over everyone present. Marcus looked at Elena with something like gratitude. She had found the strength to say what needed to be said, even when the odds seemed impossible. That night, as the colony prepared for what many feared would be the final battle, something unexpected happened. Marcus, checking the perimeter sensors one last time before trying to grab a few hours of sleep, noticed something strange on the readings. A brief flicker, far out at the edge of the system, gone almost as soon as it appeared. He almost dismissed it as sensor malfunction, exhausted as he was, but something made him keep watching. An hour later, the flicker appeared again, closer this time, and lasted longer before vanishing. Marcus's heart began to race. He knew what jump engine signatures looked like from his years in Earthfleet. Even faint ones filtered through civilian-grade sensors. Whatever was out there, it was not Skarn technology. It moved differently, felt different, in the data patterns he had learned to recognize during his military service. He ran to find Elena, waking her from the few hours of exhausted sleep she had finally managed to get. Elena, wake up. I think it's them. I think Earthfleet is here. Elena sat up immediately, all traces of sleep gone from her eyes. Are you certain? Not completely, Marcus admitted. The signature is faint, and it keeps disappearing. But it matches jump engine patterns, not Skarn stealth technology. If I had to guess, I would say ships are arriving at the edge of the system and holding position, probably gathering intelligence before making their approach. Elena felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in days, real hope. She hugged Marcus tightly, both of them exhausted, wounded, and grieving, but suddenly, impossibly, hopeful again. How long until they could reach us? She asked. If that's really Earthfleet, and if they're being cautious about the Skarn's stealth capabilities, I'd guess they will spend some time scouting, before committing to a full approach. Could be hours. Could be a full day. But Elena, they're here. Help is finally here. Word spread quickly through the shelters that night, carefully and quietly at first, then with growing excitement as more people heard the news. Earthfleet had arrived. Help was close. After 6 brutal days of fighting, loss and fear, New Haven finally had real reason to believe it might survive after all. But war leader Krath's forces were not finished yet, and the Skarn commander had no intention of losing his prize now. Not after so much had already been spent to take it. As dawn approached on the 7th day of the invasion, Krath prepared his forces for one final, overwhelming assault, determined to crush New Haven's last resistance before any rescue could possibly arrive. He did not yet know that Earth's dreadnoughts were already in the system, watching, waiting, and preparing to strike with a force far greater than anything his invasion fleet could withstand. The final battle for New Haven was about to begin. And this time, humanity would not be fighting alone. Admiral James Hollis stood on the bridge of Valkyrie, watching the tactical display as his fleet held position at the edge of the Ceres system, cloaked and silent. His scout ships had spent the last several hours gathering as much information as possible about the Skarn fleet in orbit around Ceres 9, and the picture that had formed was both encouraging and worrying. The Skarn had 7 capital ships in orbit, along with a number of smaller support vessels. By Earthfleet standards, the Skarn ships were smaller than the human dreadnoughts, but they carried unfamiliar weapon systems and that troubling stealth technology that had allowed them to appear over New Haven without any warning. Hollis's engineers had spent the journey working on countermeasures, and preliminary tests suggested their new sensor adjustments could detect the Skarn ships even while cloaked, though not perfectly. "Sir," said Commander Bello, "ground sensors from the colony report a large enemy force massing for what looks like a final assault on the shelter complex. If we do not act soon, the colony may fall before we can intervene." Hollis felt the pressure of that report like a physical weight. He had come too far, pushed his fleet too hard, to arrive just in time to watch New Haven fall. He made his decision quickly. "We attack now," he said. "Full fleet advance. Commander Bello, signal all ships. We jump in 3 waves. First wave targets their capital ships in orbit, drawing their attention and firepower away from the surface. Second wave provides close orbital support and begins clearing a path for our marine landing craft. Third wave, carrying our marines and ground support squadrons, heads straight for New Haven to relieve the colony's defenders directly." "Understood, sir," Bello replied, already relaying the orders to the rest of the fleet. Hollis turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to the colony, if you can get a signal through. Let them know help has arrived, and to hold on, just a little longer." Down on Ceres 9, War Leader Krath's final assault had already begun. Hundreds of Skarn soldiers advanced on the shelter complex from multiple directions, supported by the mobile siege cannon that had already inflicted such terrible losses on the human defenders. Marcus Cole, with barely 30 fighters left standing, organized what defense he could, knowing full well that this position could not hold against such overwhelming force. "Fall back to the inner ring," Marcus shouted over the comm, directing his exhausted fighters toward the last defensive positions, protecting the entrance to the deep shelters. "Buy every second you can. Help is coming. I promise you, help is coming." He did not fully believe his own words, not yet, not with the flicker of hope from the night before still unconfirmed, but he needed his people to believe it, needed them to find the strength for one more fight. Then the sky changed. High above Ceres 9, space itself seemed to tear open as Earthfleet's first wave dropped out of jump space, directly among the Skarn's orbital formation. 15 dreadnoughts and cruisers appeared in an instant, weapons already charged, and opened fire before the stunned Skarn ships could fully react. The battle in orbit was fast and brutal. Earth's plasma cannons, powerful weapons designed for ship-to-ship combat between massive vessels, tore into the smaller Skarn capital ships, with devastating effect. The Skarn ships fought back hard, their own weapons scoring damaging hits on several human vessels, but the sheer weight of Earthfleet's firepower, concentrated and coordinated, quickly began to turn the tide. Within the first 10 minutes of the battle, 2 Skarn capital ships had been destroyed outright, breaking apart in brilliant flashes of light visible even from the colony below. A third ship, badly damaged, began retreating toward the outer edge of the system, its weapons silent, its hull venting atmosphere into the void. War Leader Krath, still directing his ground assault on New Haven, received the emergency reports from his fleet commander in orbit, with growing alarm. This was not supposed to happen. His superiors had promised that no human military response could possibly arrive before the colony was fully secured. Yet here was an entire enemy fleet, appearing exactly where and when it could do the most damage. "Pull back the siege cannon," Krath ordered, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Concentrate all forces on breaking through the shelter complex immediately. We take this colony now, before that fleet can land ground forces." But it was already too late for such plans. Earthfleet's second wave arrived minutes later, more dreadnoughts and cruisers dropping into the system, providing close orbital support, and beginning the methodical work of clearing Skarn fighters and support craft from the space above Ceres 9. Then the third wave arrived, carrying something the Skarn ground forces had not prepared for at all. Thousands of Earthfleet Marines, backed by heavy assault craft and close air support fighters, descending directly toward New Haven. Marcus Cole, fighting desperately at the inner defensive ring with his last handful of exhausted volunteers, heard something he had not expected to hear again: the roar of engines from above, not Skarn engines, but the distinct, powerful sound of Earthfleet assault craft entering the atmosphere. He looked up just in time to see a dozen dropships descending through the smoke and dust of the battle, weapons already firing on the Skarn positions surrounding the shelter complex. Marine assault troops, clad in heavy combat armor, poured out of the landing craft the moment they touched ground, immediately engaging the surprised Skarn soldiers with disciplined, devastating firepower. "They're here," Marcus shouted, disbelief and overwhelming relief flooding through him all at once. "Earthfleet is here. Hold the line. We are not alone anymore." The tide of the battle turned with shocking speed. Earthfleet Marines, well-equipped and well-trained, cut through the Skarn assault forces that had spent days grinding down the colony's militia. The Skarn soldiers, exhausted themselves from days of continuous fighting and now facing a fresh, powerful enemy, began to fall back in disarray. Krath watched his carefully planned assault collapse in real time, his forces caught between the exhausted but determined human militia in front of them and the overwhelming firepower of Earth's Marines arriving from behind. He made a desperate decision, ordering his remaining ground forces to retreat toward their landing zone, hoping to evacuate what troops he could before the situation became a total disaster. But Earthfleet had no intention of letting the Skarn escape easily. Fighter squadrons from the third wave swept low over the battlefield, striking at the retreating Skarn columns with precision strikes that shattered their organized withdrawal into scattered, desperate flight. Marines pursued the fleeing enemy, determined to make sure the Skarn understood clearly that attacking a human colony would carry severe consequences. In orbit, the space battle continued to rage, though the outcome had become increasingly clear. Of the 7 original Skarn capital ships, 3 had been destroyed, 2 more severely damaged and retreating, and only 2 remained capable of offering meaningful resistance. Admiral Hollis, watching the battle unfold from Valkyrie's bridge, ordered his remaining forces to focus fire on the 2 functioning Skarn warships, determined to end the space battle decisively. "Concentrate all fire on the lead enemy vessel," Hollis commanded. "Let's finish this." Valkyrie and 3 other dreadnoughts turned their combined firepower on the largest remaining Skarn ship, likely war leader Krath's own command vessel based on its central position in the formation. The massive alien ship shuddered under the combined assault, its shields flaring, and finally collapsing under the sustained bombardment. Secondary explosions rippled across its hull as critical systems failed one after another. Aboard the doomed command ship, Krath received panicked reports from every section of his vessel. Weapons offline, engines failing, hull breaches on multiple decks. He understood, with bitter clarity, that his invasion had failed completely. What should have been a quick, quiet conquest had instead become a catastrophic defeat, one that would surely draw far more attention from the human military than his superiors had ever wanted. "All remaining ships, retreat," Krath ordered, his voice heavy with the weight of failure. "We cannot hold this position. Fall back to the rally point." The last operational Skarn ships broke off from the battle, jumping away into deep space as quickly as their damaged engines could manage, abandoning their remaining ground forces on Ceres 9 to whatever fate awaited them. Krath's own command ship, too badly damaged to make a clean jump, limped away at reduced speed, escorted by what little remained of his shattered invasion fleet. On the ground, with their fleet in retreat and their command structure collapsing, the remaining Skarn ground troops quickly lost all cohesion. Some continued fighting in small, desperate pockets. Most simply tried to survive, cut off from any hope of rescue or reinforcement. Earthfleet Marines, working alongside Marcus Cole's exhausted but determined militia, spent the following hours methodically securing the battlefield, taking prisoners where possible, and ending the fighting as quickly and decisively as they could. By the time the sun set on Ceres 9 that evening, the battle for New Haven was over. Earthfleet had arrived just in time, striking with overwhelming force at the exact moment the colony's defenses had been stretched to their absolute breaking point. Marcus Cole stood in the ruins of the town square, near the old fountain that had somehow survived the entire battle undamaged, and watched Earthfleet Marines securing the perimeter around him. He felt an exhaustion so deep it seemed to reach into his very bones, but underneath that exhaustion was something else, something he had almost forgotten how to feel after 7 days of relentless fighting. Relief, pure and overwhelming relief, that New Haven had survived. A young Marine officer approached him, offering a canteen of water and a quick, respectful nod. "Sir, Admiral Hollis is asking for the colony leadership. He wants to speak with whoever has been coordinating the defense." Marcus took the water gratefully, drinking deeply before answering. "That would be Governor Reyes. She's in the shelter complex. I'll take you to her." As they walked together toward the shelters, Marcus looked around at what remained of his home. Buildings destroyed, farms burned, streets scarred by the fighting. It would take years to rebuild what had been lost here. But the people, most of the people, had survived. The children hiding in the deepest shelters had survived. Elena had survived. That was what mattered most, in the end. Elena emerged from the shelter entrance just as Marcus and the young Marine officer arrived, her face showing the same mixture of exhaustion and relief that Marcus felt in his own bones. Behind her, colonists were beginning to emerge from the shelters as well, blinking in the evening light, looking around at their damaged but liberated home, with expressions of disbelief and gratitude. "Governor Reyes," the Marine officer said, "Admiral Hollis would like to speak with you, as soon as you're ready." Elena nodded, taking a deep breath before answering. "Tell the Admiral I would be honored to speak with him, and please, thank him and his people for us. Thank all of them, for coming so far, so fast, to save us." As the Marine officer relayed the message, Elena turned to Marcus, tears finally breaking through the composed exterior she had maintained throughout the entire ordeal. "We made it," she said quietly. "We actually made it." Marcus put a hand on her shoulder, offering what comfort he could, after everything they had endured together. "We made it," he agreed, "because we held on long enough for help to arrive, because Earth did not forget about us." Above them, in the darkening sky, the massive shapes of Earth Fleet's dreadnoughts could be seen holding orbit around Ceres 9, no longer symbols of distant, unused power, but proof that humanity would answer the call when its people needed help most, no matter how far away that call had to travel. The battle for New Haven was over, but the war between humanity and the Skarn Dominion, humanity now understood with grim clarity, had only just begun. 3 weeks after the battle, New Haven had begun to heal, though the scars of the invasion were still visible everywhere Elena Reyes looked. Burned fields were being replanted. Damaged buildings were slowly being repaired, with help from Earth Fleet engineering teams who had stayed behind after the fighting ended. The town square fountain, one of the few things that had survived the battle untouched, had become an unofficial gathering place, where colonists left flowers and small tributes for those who had not survived the 7 days of fighting. Admiral James Hollis had kept a significant portion of his fleet in orbit around Ceres 9, both to help with the recovery effort and to guard against any possibility of the Skarn Dominion returning for a second attempt. Marine engineering teams worked alongside colony residents, clearing rubble, rebuilding damaged infrastructure, and helping to restore the water treatment plant that Elena had helped build so many years ago. Elena stood in her rebuilt office one afternoon, looking out at the town below, now bustling with activity again, despite everything it had been through. She thought about how close New Haven had come to complete destruction, and how different things might have looked if Earth Fleet had arrived even a single day later. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Marcus Cole entered, looking healthier than he had during the siege, though still favoring the leg that had been wounded during the final battle. He had been offered a position with Earth Fleet's new Colonial Defense Initiative, a program being created specifically in response to what had happened at New Haven, but he had not yet decided whether to accept. "Admiral Hollis wants to see us both before he departs," Marcus said. "His fleet is heading back to Earth within the week, though he's leaving a permanent garrison here, along with several defense platforms to watch the system." Elena nodded, gathering her thoughts before they walked together to the temporary command post Earth Fleet had established near the shelter complex. Hollis greeted them warmly when they arrived, looking like a man who had aged years during the recent crisis, though his eyes still held the same steady determination Elena had come to respect deeply over the past few weeks. "Governor Reyes, Captain Cole," Hollis said, using the honorary rank that Earth Fleet had granted Marcus for his leadership during the siege. "I wanted to speak with you both before we depart, to discuss what comes next." They sat together in the command post, and Hollis explained what Earth Fleet Command had decided in the aftermath of the battle. The attack on New Haven had changed everything for humanity's understanding of its place among the stars. No longer could Earth assume it was alone, or that its scattered colonies were safe from outside threats. Fleet Marshal Okafor had already ordered a massive expansion of Earth Fleet's colonial defense capabilities, with new dreadnoughts being constructed and permanent garrisons planned for every major human colony. "What happened here changed the entire conversation back home," Hollis said. "For years, some in our government argued that Earth Fleet's dreadnoughts were an unnecessary expense, relics from a conflict that never fully happened. New Haven proved otherwise. We are already alone no longer, and there is at least one power out there willing to attack us without warning. We have to be ready for whatever comes next." Elena thought about the message she had sent that first desperate day, not knowing if it would ever be received, not knowing if help could possibly arrive in time. "What about the Skarn Dominion?" Do we know anything more about them? About why they attacked us? About whether they will try again? Hollis's expression grew more serious. We captured several Skarn soldiers during the final battle, along with a good deal of technology and data from their damaged ships. Our intelligence teams have been analyzing everything we recovered. What we've learned so far is troubling. The Skarn Dominion is a large interstellar power, controlling numerous worlds across a significant region of space. They have a history of conquering less advanced civilizations, absorbing their resources and populations into the Dominion's control. They thought we would be an easy target, Marcus said quietly, understanding dawning in his voice. A small colony, no real military, isolated from Earth by distance. They thought they could take New Haven quickly and quietly, before anyone could respond. That appears to be exactly their strategy, Hollis confirmed. Small, quiet conquests, taken before the target's homeworld even knows what happened. It's likely they have done this successfully many times before against other species. New Haven was probably just the first target in what they intended to be a broader campaign against human colonies. The implications settled heavily over the room. If the Skarn Dominion had planned to conquer human colonies one by one, quietly and efficiently, then New Haven's stubborn resistance and Earth Fleet's decisive response had disrupted something much larger than a single attack. It had shown the Skarn Dominion, and any other watching powers, that humanity would not go quietly, that an attack on any human colony would bring the full might of Earth Fleet in response, regardless of the distance involved. What happens now? Elena asked. Will they come back? I won't lie to you, Hollis said. It's possible. The Skarn Dominion lost soldiers, ships, and prestige here. They may want revenge, or they may simply write off this attempt as a failure and look elsewhere for easier targets. What I can promise you is that New Haven will not be undefended again. We're establishing a permanent fleet presence here, along with orbital defense platforms that will give us advance warning of any future attack, and we're doing the same at every other human colony, starting immediately. Marcus leaned forward. And the position with the Colonial Defense Initiative? What exactly would that involve? Hollis smiled slightly, the first genuine smile Elena had seen from him since his fleet's arrival. Training colonial militias across human space, teaching them what your people learned the hard way here at New Haven. How to fight, how to hold a defensive line, how to survive against overwhelming force long enough for help to arrive. You have knowledge now that most military officers back on Earth simply don't have. Real combat experience against this new enemy. That kind of knowledge is invaluable, and I would very much like you to help share it with other colonies who might face similar threats in the future. Marcus thought about David Park, about Sarah Chen, about the father and son who had died fighting side by side, about all the names on the list he now carried with him everywhere he went. If accepting this position meant other colonies might not have to pay the same terrible price New Haven had paid, then it felt like the only choice he could make. I'll do it, Marcus said. On one condition. I want to bring some of New Haven's own militia volunteers with me, the ones who survived. They earned the right to help train others, and honestly, I could use people I trust at my side. Done, Hollis agreed immediately. I'll have the paperwork processed before we depart. The conversation turned to practical matters after that, discussing the details of the permanent garrison, the defense platforms being constructed in orbit, and the timeline for New Haven's continued rebuilding. By the time Elena and Marcus left the command post that evening, the sun was setting over Ceres 9, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, a stark and beautiful contrast to the darker colors that had filled that same sky during the battle weeks earlier. They walked together toward the town square, where a memorial was being constructed to honor everyone who had died defending New Haven. The names were being carved carefully into a stone monument, arranged around the base of the old fountain that had somehow survived everything the battle had thrown at it. Elena had insisted on this location specifically, wanting the memorial to stand where the town's daily life would continue around it. A permanent reminder, woven into the fabric of the community, rather than set apart from it. Do you think we're ready? Elena asked, looking at the growing list of names on the monument. For whatever comes next, I mean. The Skarn, or anyone else out there who might see us as an easy target. Marcus considered the question carefully before answering. I think we learned something important here. Something that goes beyond weapons or tactics. We learned that humanity does not give up, even when the odds are impossible. even when help seems impossibly far away. We learned that Earth will answer the call, no matter the distance, no matter the cost. That's not nothing, Elena. That's actually everything. Elena nodded slowly, finding some measure of comfort in his words. She looked up at the sky, now filled with stars beginning to emerge as the last light of sunset faded away. Somewhere among those stars, Earthfleet's dreadnoughts continued their patrol, watching over New Haven, ready to answer the call again if it ever came. Somewhere among those same stars, the Skarn Dominion licked its wounds and reconsidered its plans, having learned a hard lesson about underestimating a species it had judged too quickly as weak and unprepared. And somewhere much closer to home, at shipyards across the solar system, construction crews worked around the clock building new dreadnoughts, new defense platforms, new tools, for a future that suddenly looked far less certain than it had just a month before. Humanity had learned it was not alone in the universe, and that lesson had come at a terrible cost. But it had also learned something else, something that mattered just as much. When the call for help went out, humanity would answer it, with everything it had, no matter how far away that call needed to travel. New Haven would rebuild. Its people would remember those they had lost, would carry their names forward as a reminder of the price paid for their survival. And when new colonies were established in the years that followed, they would go forward not with the naive hope that the universe was empty and safe, but with the confident knowledge that even at the farthest edges of human space, Earth would never abandon its own. The dreadnoughts had arrived in time to save New Haven. But their true legacy would be felt for generations to come, in every colony that would now grow up knowing that humanity stood together, that distance was no obstacle to loyalty, and that anyone foolish enough to attack a human colony would face the full, unstoppable answer of Earth's mighty fleet. The war with the Skarn Dominion had only just begun, but humanity, scarred and grieving but unbroken, was ready to meet whatever came next, together, as it always had been meant to be.